Musings podcast with Fairbairn and Russell. Well, hello and welcome to Market Musings podcast here from Stopbox, where today we're talking to Craig Foster, the CEO of ONDO InsurTech. And of course, Craig has been on Stopbox a fair few times doing various interviews as the company has, recently listed and has started to build out its product and its market cap. But it's good to be talking to you on the podcast today, Craig, where hopefully we get to know a little bit more about you. But how are you doing, first of all?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, how are you guys doing?
Yes, also very well. Thank you, Craig. Definitely you can feel that summer is coming to an end and people are getting back to work. Just by looking at my own diary, I can see that it's filling up with various interviews. But that's what happens. And it's a good thing. We enjoy the summer holiday and then we get back to work, don't we? Kenny, how are you? You said it was very like winter in Scotland this morning to me.
Yeah, it was quite depressing. Hi, Craig, how are you getting on? No, it was like summer last week. It was beautiful, and then this week it's just went. It's like a light switch. It's just went winter. But that's Scotland for you. We used to, we just get on with it. So that's what it is. But no, it's fantastic to have you on the podcast, Craig. And like we talked about off air, this is an opportunity for investors to sort of to get the kind of, I think I said it offline, it was like MTV Unplugged. It's like a stripped back sort of podcast where we can learn about you, your background, your successes, failures. And failures are great, by the way, because you learn more about failures than you do successes. Well, my experience anyway. So probably, for the next 15, 20 minutes, it's just an opportunity for you to tell us a bit about yourself. You can go back as far as you want, growing up, influences, motivation, degree if you've got one, first job, worst job, just all the kind of stuff that people want to know so that they can make a balanced investment decision rather than just looking at the website and I wonder what that guy's like. Well, here's your opportunity to tell us, Craig.
Very good. Well, I didn't know that was what we were going to be talking about. So this is definitely going to be 100% unrehearsed stream of consciousness then, if that's what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's why we do it. There's no format to it. It just flows. We've done over 200 of these, so it clearly works or people wouldn't come back for more. So, no, it's good. So, yeah, I'll stop talking now. I'll let you crack on because it's about you.
Yeah, where do you want me to start then, Kenny? I mean... depends how far you want me to go back. I mean,
it's up to you. You go back as far as you want, whatever you're comfortable with,
Yeah, well, I definitely don't have a particularly kind of glamorous backstory. I grew up in a little village just north of Scunthorpe, and Scunthorpe's a funny place. Like, unless you got some kind of reason to go there, people have heard of it and never been there. And so yeah, well, I mean, it's like a steelwork town, isn't it? So my dad.
I have been to Scunthorpe. I know the place well. One of my dad's businesses, he had a little workshop over there. But yeah, it's not somewhere you would normally go to, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we worked on the steelworks. My mum was a secretary on the steelworks. So it's like a cliche. Everyone worked on the steelworks. And you said about first job. My first job was I worked in like an engineering workshop, just big lathes and milling machines. And as a teenager, I'm sure you wouldn't get away with this for health and safety nowadays, but my job was, I used to go in on a Saturday and I have to clean all the swarf off the machines, the little metal cuttings. And you used to cut your skin to ribbons, but I was like a 14-year-old kid, like climbing in these machines, like shoveling out all the bits of steel. I can't imagine you getting away with that nowadays, but it was great to earn a little bit of money. But somehow escaped Scunthorpe, went to university in Nottingham, and studied management studies at the University of Nottingham there. And it was there that I really got a good break, really. I did I managed to get on a summer internship for Procter & Gamble. So I worked there for 3 months through the summer. And it was just such an incredible experience. Their attitude is they recruit for the summer internship as if they're recruiting for the company. It's just as hard to get on the internship as it is to, it's basically the way that they recruit to get people into the business. And then the 3 months you work there is kind of like a 3-month assessment on whether you're going to get offered a job. And then they give you an actual real job, just as if you're an assistant brand manager. So I did that for 3 months and then was offered a full-time role after I graduated. And that was really the thing that kickstarted my career. It was such a great company to work for. And I worked there through such an interesting time in their development as well. The CEO at the time was a guy called A.G. Lafley, and the business just grew so much through that period. I got amazing opportunities. Lived in Geneva and Switzerland for 4 years. Traveled all around the world with them. I did a global job on, Head and Shoulders shampoo.
Yep.
So I spent time in China, a lot of time in the United States. And really, it was really like, like an MBA without having to go to business school, working for a company like that. I think a lot of people that leave Procter & Gamble always say that don't quite realize how good a company it is because it's all you know, because they only recruit at graduate level. They're quite weird. They don't, everyone at Procter & Gamble has worked there forever and never worked anywhere else. So it's a bit cult-like, but it's a great company. So yeah, that's where I started out.
Yeah, people don't realise how big Procter & Gamble are and the many products they've got. There's probably, you go into your supermarket and you put like 20 things in your basket and probably 5 of them are Procter & Gamble products. They're massive.
Yeah, it's weird. And there used to be a debate back then around, because I think Unilever are slightly more better known because that's a kind of Anglo-Dutch competitor of Procter & Gamble. But I think there used to be a debate on should the actual Procter & Gamble logo be consumer facing in any way, but it's deliberately unknown by consumers. They build the individual brands. But as soon as I spent a lot of time, from my background, Procter & Gamble, is that a medical company? Like, what is that people didn't even know? And then he said, have you heard of Pampers? Have you heard of Pantene shampoo? You could reel off the brands. And of course they know all of them. And it was I think it's just an obvious way to do business. It always seemed to me like their absolute mandate across every single brand was, we are going to be the market leader. And if we can't be the number 1 or the number 2 brand, we're not interested in the category. And then the way that they did it, and then they thought, how can they, across so many categories, systematically become the leading brand? Like, there's obviously like a process that's not just through luck. And it was always the same thing. It was like we just rigorously understand what the consumer wants, like what's the actual benefit that they're looking for. And then we spend loads of money on research and design. Like, I went to the head office in Cincinnati where a lot of the R&D centers are over there. And it is just unbelievable the amount of scientists that work there, and they're just testing formulations and then patenting them so that they've got a competitive edge. Like, I'll give you an example. It sounds nuts, but say on Head and Shoulders, on the dandruff shampoo, right? Sounds like, it's not very glamorous. But if you've got dandruff, that's a big problem, right? People are, very self-conscious of that. It's a problem you'll pay money to solve if there's a good solution. And there's a chemical that everyone in a dandruff shampoo uses, the same thing, called pyrithione zinc, and that just solves it. And the scientists in the lab, they worked out a way to flatten the compound so it sits on the head. And they did loads and loads of lab tests, and clinical trials just showed that that's a better formulation, patented it, and then they've just got a slightly better version than everybody else. And then that's the number 1 best-selling shampoo in the entire world. I think at the time when I worked on the brand, they had $2 billion of revenue a year on that single shampoo brand. And by the way, they also own Pantene and Herbal Essences and Aussie, and half the shampoos in the category. And but that they applied that same logic to every single brand. So it's a great way to do business.
Yeah, definitely. And what was your kind of role there? Was it like project management, or was that your kind of?
Yeah, so I worked. I worked in marketing, and I thought that was everyone's definition of marketing because that's just what I knew from Procter & Gamble. So in P&G, the marketing guys are really the P&L owners and the business leaders. So all the CEOs are from marketing, and brand management is a very kind of all-encompassing. You're on the team, and marketing in Procter & Gamble's world spans product development, pricing, all the actual promotional strategy for the brand. And the reason why, so my job, I joined as an assistant brand manager, and I then became brand manager, and did different roles. So you do a different role in a local region. It's much more focused on the advertising. So, PR strategy, local advertising campaigns. But then you do like a regional job in Geneva where you're developing advertising for the whole of a region, for the Western Europe in our case. So there's the production of the TV advertising and that kind of thing. But the most interesting thing I did was in the global role, where it's much more about the strategy and the product development. So there you're working on the formulations, the packaging, the positioning of the product, the consumer research, the pricing strategy. And and you're very much encouraged to, lead that business. And I think I just assumed every company was like that. And then when I first went into financial services, I left there and went joined HBOS before the financial crisis. And I was quite surprised that it's in financial services, it's quite a different it's quite a different mentality. So yeah, the reason that I left P&G was I met my first wife was also worked at the company. So we met there. We met in the UK. We moved to Geneva for a couple of years, and then when we were going to get married, she wanted to settle down back in the UK. So I've just fancied a change, rather than going back to work in the same P&G office where I'd already worked for a few years. So I left there and I got offered a job, suddenly leading a team of like 50 odd people across running marketing for home insurance, funnily enough. And that was at HBOS. So you may remember HBOS, Halifax Bank of Scotland. Mm-hmm. It became probably more famous in the general population through the financial crisis, and then it got took over by Lloyd's. So yeah, that was quite an interesting experience to live through that. I'm sure you guys will remember the same period very well.
Oh yeah, I remember just about, it was 2008, wasn't it? I was at university. It didn't affect me in the slightest. But I remember all the headlines going around. Yeah, for sure. The first one was Northern Rock, wasn't it? And everyone blamed Robert Peston for the BBC for making that. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
making that one go bust. But yeah, no, I do remember that. But I'm just what products were you responsible for at P&G? Did you mention that?
Yeah, so I worked across a few Max Factor makeup.
Okay,
at the very beginning, and then most of the time then in shampoo. Since I've gone board, it's quite ironic that I spent most of the time promoting hair care brands. But it was mostly herbal essences and then Head and Shoulders. But did a bunch of different roles for. You can imagine that if it's $2 billion revenue brand, there's quite a lot of different aspects to what you can do. So spanned all of those different roles, especially at Head and Shoulders. Like did everything from a regional job based in the UK, doing all the local promotions, through to a regional job doing the actual TV advertising and developing that, and then the global job, which was all about product innovation and innovation pipeline, that kind of thing.
I can already see how you're moving towards where you are now, working in like FMCG. Is it how you call it, fast moving consumer goods? That sector, and then of course working for Halifax as selling home insurance. So I can already see how this is all aligning up to effectively what Ondo have.
It is, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's obviously all just funny how things pan out, isn't it? But yeah, that early phase at Procter & Gamble has been amazing in terms of a lot about how you think about the strategy of a business. So A.G. Lafley he subsequently wrote a book about it called Playing to Win, but we learned that on the job while we were there. He had a very specific way of formulating strategy, about articulating a very big vision about where he wanted to get to, but then making very specific choices about where to play in the market and how to win. And how to win was all about how do you develop a sustainable competitive advantage that's meaningful to the consumer or to the end customer. And all of that it's always been really, really helpful through all the stages through LeakBot. And just developing the packaging, the branding, the product, all of that was good. So it's weird. It was, when you look back at it, it's so funny how even talking about it now, it's odd. I don't think it's ever really occurred to me, Mark, until you said it, just quite how strange. It was like a perfect training ground for what we did later on.
Yeah. You must have been quite young when you worked at Procter & Gamble. You said you came straight out of uni, so it looks like you had kind of responsibility at quite an early age, early 20s.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really difficult company to get into still today. So I think the process to get in there, it's when you come out of university, it's one of the toughest companies I think to get into, and then they have what's really great about it is, especially do you know what, it's less relevant today with new media, and you guys are in this world. I think if you wind the clock back, you remember just how important mainstream TV advertising used to be. I think it's become less important in the world that we live in today. But obviously, when there only used to be 5 TV channels, TV advertising was actually absolutely king, wasn't it, for a while? And if you think a lot of companies, if they've got a single brand and they decide to make a TV ad, it's quite a big undertaking still today. So sitting around the table with the advertising agency is normally probably the chief executive of the company, and then maybe the CMO and the marketing director. What's weird about a Procter & Gamble or a Unilever is because they've got 200 brands, and each one of those brands is making a lot of TV adverts. It's not the CEO of the company that's interested in going to the meeting with the advertising agency. So if you work at Procter & Gamble at a really young age, you've got a place around the table with, basically developing the strategy on TV advertising. And, even culturally, the things that they used to do, I've tried to remember some of this stuff because this was a great practice. So you'd be sat around the table with, Leo Burnett or Saatchi & Saatchi, and they would pitch a concept for a TV ad. And you'd be sat there straight out of university and as an assistant brand manager. And then the brand manager sat next to you, and maybe there's a marketing director there as well. And then there's like 10 people from the ad agency, and they do this big pitch. And then they say, right, what's your feedback? And they all look at the marketing director, who's the decision maker. And then he would look at you and say, I'd like to know what Craig thinks first. And then he would all look at you. But it wasn't, you couldn't just say, oh no, I like it. They trained you in how to give a really strategic and thorough, well, this is, the idea of the advertising is exactly about the benefit that the consumer cares about, but actually the way the drama unfolds in the advert's not that engaging. So I think the idea is right, but we need to change the drama. You had to be really on point. But the reason they did it is because they knew if you as the junior person spoke last, no one would listen to you. So the marketing director would ask you first, so everyone listened to you. But he would also do it because he was a bit rusty nowadays, and he didn't want to think that hard about whether it's the right thing to do. And he'd listen to you and then go, actually, I agree with what Craig said. That's just what I was going to say. So yeah, so you did have a lot of responsibility. I mean, even at, in my early 20s, I had an advertising budget of, when I was working in the UK, of about £30 million to spend on Head and Shoulders. And, think, in today's money, it's a lot of money. And you're allocating that across different, different types of marketing spend and trying to work out the return on investment. It's large amounts of marketing investment. I think P&G is always, it's either P&G or the government are always the single biggest spender on advertising in the UK, really? Pretty much every year I've not checked recently, but it always used to be the case.
Wow. That's a fact there. I mean, I bet that was so fascinating to go in those meetings. That was a career that I would have gone down if I didn't go down a different route, would be work for a marketing agency. And was it anything like, have you ever seen Mad Men?
I really enjoyed that. Yeah, it was. I think back to it, and there was elements. I had this. There was a Parisian guy who was one of my first ever bosses. I absolutely love that guy, and and the director at the advertising agency was also from Paris, and she was this really glamorous French lady, and we used to go for meetings at Leo Burnett, and they would pitch the advertising concept in the big boardroom, and then after the pitch, we'd done the feedback, they would just pass around cigarettes, and everyone would sit around the board table smoking cigarettes. Again, it's like you can't imagine that nowadays.
No, not at all. That is like a scene out of Mad Men. That must have been so interesting to do that. Advertising is such a huge business. So I mean, you went to Halifax, and then you explained why the move to HBOS there. How did you end up in home insurance? Or was that just, did you apply for that job, or what was the sort of thinking when you applied for the Halifax job?
Yeah, it was just, I still lived in Geneva at the time, and I got a headhunter call saying,
okay.
It was a headhunter call saying, oh, they're looking for somebody to lead this team. They're specifically interested in someone with FMCG experience because they want to bring that kind of consumer angle in.
Okay.
Someone who's customer focused, but also, had that hands-on experience making, knows about advertising and that kind of thing. So in terms of like the team size, that was the biggest change there. I suddenly had a team of about 50 people. And but yeah, it was a real culture shock. I mean, it was the offices back up in Halifax, and it was I thought because HBOS at the time I think was the 8th biggest company on the stock market in the UK. So I thought it's going to be like a lot of this is going to be very similar to what I'm used to at Procter & Gamble, just more British and less American, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I've got to be careful what I say, really. I don't want to, overstepping my talking about financial services, but it was just very interesting. It's a different way of making money. I think that was in a nutshell, I would say, Procter & Gamble, you look at the way, somebody like Apple, the way Apple develop products to have that edge and create a differentiation that people will pay a premium for. That's one way. There's another way, which is almost, relying on, consumer psychology where, and you can almost, I don't say take advantage, but there's certain ways just people will behave. And then if you've got your competitive advantage is based on something else, just the incumbent position that no one can break through. And it was just crazy. Like, I was just surprised how just financial services, I'm not saying anything that all the firms used to be the same, the way that they'll, bring you in on a high savings rate, and then over time it reduces and people don't move. The way current accounts make money by, charging people the late overdraft fees and free banking. It's a subset of the population that's subsidizing everyone's free banking, but the subset that can't really afford to be subsidizing everyone's banking. All of these things are well known now, but I don't think it was that well known at the time. And I kept asking lots of questions. I was like, really? Is that really how it works? So this is quite surprising. So yeah, it was an interesting, I wasn't there that long because the financial crisis hit, and then the Lloyd's takeover was announced. And it was I think literally like a couple of days after that, I got another headhunter call. And it was just one of those calls that piques your interest. It was, have you heard of this firm called Homeserve? It was set up by this ex-Procter & Gamble guy called Richard Harpin with his ex-Procter & Gamble mate, Jeremy Middleton. And now it's a FTSE 250 company, and they want to hire a product director. And but he's got to come from Procter & Gamble. It's the only brief we've got to hire someone. So are you interested? And that's the first time I went down and met the guys from Homeserve. And I thought, well, seems like it was a much smaller company than what I was used to working in, and that had a certain attraction. I thought, well, I think I could make a real difference at a company that kind of size. And so that was the next move.
How does one get headhunted, Craig? I've heard this before, but I've never had a headhunting call. Do you have to be on an agency, or you just, did people just find you? Because it's just in the days before LinkedIn, presumably. I know a lot of people get contacted through LinkedIn these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably. I think LinkedIn is how they do it nowadays, isn't it? But yeah, I think back then it used to be very much they'd build a network. I think LinkedIn, a lot of the headhunters, I know almost LinkedIn sport it a bit because they used to have their own version of LinkedIn. They had their own database of trying to work out corporate structures. And then, they'd always ring you up and say, oh, we're looking for, do you know anyone? I always used to get asked, like, who are the real shining stars who the company wouldn't want to leave? And you wouldn't want to tell them that if you were still loyal to the company, So I think that's how they used to work. I think now probably more reliant on LinkedIn.
Hey? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, no, I just find it interesting. People getting headhunted. I've heard of it. Never happened to me. I've always had to apply for jobs or look for jobs. But there we go. So the Homeserve move, that was something that you pretty much jumped at then, was it, that opportunity?
I mean, I think once I'd come and met the team, I like the sound of the role, and I think what I hoped for, I definitely found there, which is having worked for two, especially at HBOS, with the financial regulation, it was very difficult to get stuff done. So much bureaucracy, so much process. And then I joined Homeserve, and I found it was, especially because Richard Harpin is an out and out entrepreneur, that entrepreneurial kind of DNA ran through the company. So there was a definite bias to making things happen, improving things, doing new stuff. And I found that in that company, I found it quite easy, not easy, but I found, this is a breath of fresh air. I really can make things happen here. I found that applying some of the tools that I'd learned at P&G about how to just get people excited about an idea, figure out the next steps, work the politics. A lot of people feel like, I don't hear it so much anymore, but when I worked in bigger companies, you'd hear people say, I hate the politics. I don't want to do the politics, but that's just life. It's just not really politics so much. It's just that everyone's got different agendas based on their own priorities in a big company. And part of the art of getting things done in a big company is just understanding different people's agendas and, understanding how you need to navigate your project through the various machinations to make it happen. And I found that was a lot easier thing to navigate in a company the size of Homeserve. So, and then I kind of flew there, really. So I joined as the product director, so I was responsible for the existing product portfolio and all new product development. But it was one of those companies where as soon as they realized that you were good at getting stuff done, they just kept giving you more things. So I don't even know what you call them, different various job titles, but suddenly I also had responsibility for renewals and retention marketing, and then all of digital marketing and new business. And I kept just getting things added on.
And was it a startup at the time, or a bit more than a startup?
No, it was already like a FTSE 250 company at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And
so I had probably 3 million customers in the UK.
Okay.
And
the business model was what then? I mean, I know people have heard of Homeserve. Was it insurance? Was it product based?
Yeah. So it was. I mean, in the very beginning, Richard didn't call it insurance, but the regulator kind of pointed out to him, I think it is insurance.
Okay.
Which he didn't like. Once the FSA at the time took responsibility for insurance as well. But in a nutshell, what it was is his insight was, back then, if you needed a plumber, you'd go in the yellow pages and you'd lucky dip, call a plumber, and you might get ripped off. So the original idea, Richard did a partnership with South Staffs Water, and they sent something in the post to their customers and said, would you like to take part in this new scheme from South Staffs Water? You pay a few pounds per month, and then if you have a leak or a plumbing problem, we'll send a plumber, and that's just included as part of the membership for the £3 a month. And he got a couple of % take-up rate on that first mailing. And that was basically the core model. So he rolled that out with water companies across the UK, expanded that same model into France, Spain, eventually into the United States. Anyone listening to this podcast will probably be nodding and going, I've got those bloody things in the post from Thames or from whoever's your water company. You go, oh, I know those things. They come in the post because they still do the same thing. So that was basically their core business. And so how I ended up creating this innovation lab for them is I'd been there for a couple of years, and there was a guy taking over as the UK CEO, and he was from a guy called Martin Bennett, and he was from like a finance background. And before he took over as CEO, he used to be the CFO. He asked the board, can I go to business school for a few weeks ahead of me taking on the role, just to kind of give me some new ideas? And they basically sent me with him to kind of chaperone him, because I think everyone was thinking, we don't want the finance guy to come back with loads of marketing ideas. It's going to be a nightmare. So they said, send Craig so we don't come back with like loads of crazy ideas. But the exact opposite happened. So I went with him. We had just incredible time. We went to this thing called Hyper Island in Stockholm, spent some time at London Business School. And then what happened is we both came back with crazy ideas, because we kind of drank the Kool-Aid and done all these courses about, disruptive innovation. And it was all about how, digital can just change markets and, fundamentally change the kind of, competitive landscape in a category. So from the back of that, we set up this innovation lab. And at the start, I was doing it kind of in addition to all my regular responsibilities in the company. And it was Richard Harpin as the CEO of the company one day. We'd been going for a while, and some of these ideas had some promise. That we probably very early version of LeakBot in the mix. And Richard kind of said to me, look, no one created $1 billion business off the side of their desk. So if you're serious about this, Craig, you need to quit your other responsibilities and just do this. And you can pick a team and we'll fund it, but you've got to give up your day job. And at this point, I was supposed to take over as CMO for the whole company. So it was a real it was a real career gamble at that point. I was like, oh man, I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do. And, but I don't know. It was just too exciting to say no to, so I decided to go for it.
It is a gamble, isn't it? You've got a guaranteed job there, a very, very good job, CMO of Homeserve, or you take a risk and potentially lose everything and have to start again from scratch. But yeah, I think that goes to show something about your perhaps entrepreneurial mindset as well, because not everyone would go and take that risk, and anyone who's started a business has to have those debates with themselves. I think my mum tells me, drank a fair few whiskies for a few nights, for a few weeks, when he was debating whether to leave his safe job at Massey Ferguson or go and start a company. And I'm glad he did start a company, because it did the family very well over the years.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. So just you mentioned LeakBot there. So it's obviously the start of LeakBot. What year was this? Do you remember?
I mean, it was probably about 2015 when we started the innovation lab. But we were doing a bunch of different things in there to start with. It was more to do with connected heating. And we set up the first network for Nest. Nest, the smart thermostat that got bought by Google when they launched in the UK. And then we invested in a German smart thermostat company called Tardo. So for a while, I was used to attend all the board meetings in Munich once a month. And that was a venture-backed business. So that was really interesting. Again, it's totally different. Like seeing a startup go through, a connected home startup, go through some gears of growth, and been in every single board meetings with a bunch of like German venture capitalists around the table. And I was just represented because we bought basically, I can't remember, 10 or 15% of the business at that time. And but that was fascinating. Like I didn't have too much to contribute really in those meetings. I just learned a huge amount just by listening to how they thought about it, and what questions did the VC guys ask them every week. It was really interesting. So yeah, it was a cool thing to do.
So this was 2015. So yeah, the product's been in development, yeah, for quite a number of years then, really.
Yeah.
Go on, Kenny.
Yeah, I was just going to say, at what point, Craig, did the decision, to take the LeakBot, as a listed company, when it takes a few years, obviously, to get that process done, but was that always the aim, or did it just happen? How did it come about?
Yeah, well, do you know what's really funny is I'm quite an advocate of this idea that and there's lots of different ways of doing it, right? There's a different, so if you paint a picture of the future, there was a good story from I've forgotten the name. What's the marathon runner, the British lady who won a gold medal in the marathon?
Paula Radcliffe.
Yeah, Paula Radcliffe. So this is a good example of this, right? So Paula Radcliffe's dad tells this story where when she was about 8 years old, she was watching the Olympics and she saw someone won a gold medal at the Olympics. And she was not sporty. She wasn't really interested in sports. And she saw that and it just printed on her brain. And from that moment on, she said, I'm going to win a gold medal. And then eventually she had such a clear vision of it that it happened. And there's so many stories about how this works. The more viscerally you can see a vision, the more it tends to happen. And at the start of that innovation lab, we still got some of these documents. As the team that we're working on it, we take ourselves off for the day and think big about, okay, in 5 years, what do we want to say this innovation lab's done? And at the time, it sounded absolutely pie in the sky crazy. And it was stuff like that. So we're going to create a breakthrough product, with an amazing competitive advantage. And it's going to turn into a massive bit and we'll spin it out of Homeserve as a separate thing. And back then we didn't even have any ideas, and I was just like, we're going to do something like this. And we've done that a few times. Like there was another point where we got LeakBot up and running a little bit, but it's an early prototype. And then we did the same exercise and said, okay, well, how can you imagine this in 5 years' time? And it's uncanny looking back on it, how it panned out the way we articulated it at the time. But at the beginning, so I think from the very start, we did, as a team, we loved the idea that we could create a separate business. And it was what I liked as well, the autonomy was I loved that at the beginning. The fact that even though Homeserve was quite entrepreneurial, there was still lots of departments, and the IT department would stop you developing things, and you have to get everything approved through finance, every little bit of spend, and there was so much process still. And suddenly, we had a budget, we could make the decisions, we could go quickly, and we were trusted to do the right thing and see if we can make it work. And I think once you've done that, that was hard for me to then go back, because I thought, I really like this. This is like because it's already difficult. That's the thing. Like it's already difficult figuring something like this out without loads of people making it even harder for you and slowing you down. So it was good fun.
Yep. And I mean, obviously we've talked quite a lot about LeakBot already, Craig, and maybe people, I've never heard of ONDO so far. Can you maybe just give us a high-level overview of what LeakBot is and what it intends to do? What's its purpose, etc.
Yeah, sure. So we spun the LeakBot business out as a separate entity, and then the company a year and a half ago became ONDO.
Yep.
So in a nutshell, LeakBot, the thing that we invented is basically a sensor that can detect leaks on mains water plumbing. And it's a non-invasive way of doing it. So it's a little sensor, you clip it to a pipe and it can detect a leak anywhere on that mains water system. And it's really sensitive, down to a couple of milliliters per minute. And the thing that we figured out is it solves a massive problem for the home insurance industry specifically. So, on home insurance, the biggest cause of claim is actually damage to houses from leaks. Something starts dripping and it damages the property. And that is actually, 16 billion pounds a year if you take the US and the UK together. Huge, it's a massive problem. And our sensor basically picks up exactly those leaks that cause those claims. So the system that we've developed is that connects to an app. Through the app, you can book a plumber. Plumber comes and fixes it, and that delivers a return on investment for the insurer. So that's the business in a nutshell.
Yeah, and obviously the market for this is huge. You know, the amount of households and, well, not just households, I suppose, industrial and commercial applications as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the market is massive. Yeah, so I mean, when you say the market's massive, the amount of spend on claims for this purpose is absolutely huge. So, but I guess we're kind of creating a market where that spend is getting diverted into preventative technology. So it's definitely a big shift in the market that's underway, and you see it in other categories as well. Like there's a really interesting product in the US called Ting, Ting, which is so much like LeakBot. You plug it into a US socket, and it looks for electrical arcs, because I don't think the electrics is grounded in the US in the same way as the UK. So electrical systems cause a lot of house fires in the US. So it's a little sensor. It sits there, spots these arcs. If there's an issue, you book an electrician, and then it prevents the claims from happening. I think State Farm have said they're planning to install 1 million of these things in their customer base in the US. So there's a definite shift in that direction. But yeah, the cost of claims on water damage is, like I say, in the US and the UK together is about £16 billion a year.
Yeah, you guys have already broke into the US, is that right, Craig? And I think some sort of Scandinavian countries as well. Yeah,
so we started in the UK. We've got business in Denmark and Sweden. Sweden's really interesting. We've got a partnership with the largest insurance company there, Landshyfringar, where we did a pilot. We started that rollout now. They've got a couple of million customers in Sweden. They're the market leader. The US is really exciting opportunity. So we announced 2 partnerships. We just launched actually with Mutual of Enumclaw, so that's live now. We're shipping to their customers. That's going well. And we signed another partnership with Pure, that's a high net worth insurer in the US. I think it's a momentum game in the US, and it's a game of like credibility. We're a bit less known over there. The brand's a bit less, not as well known as it is in the industry over here. So it's about building credibility and winning a couple more deals. And the partners that we've won so far, are relatively smaller insurers by US standards, because they've got some absolute giants. If you look at the top 10 carriers over there, they're absolutely huge by UK standards. But I think the treasure trove there is, can we land one of those whales? Because I think that will really make that momentum shift in the US market, that this is for this little UK company are for real about having a go at doing this in the US.
Yep. And is there any competition out there, Craig?
I mean, there are competitor solutions, but nothing quite like ours. So there's a good product called Flow. It's called Flow by Moen, but it's there's nothing particularly unique about it. It's a plumbed-in system. So I mentioned that one because it's probably the most nicely designed one. But a plumber has to go to the property and cut the pipe and physically install it. And but it costs, that costs a couple of $100 just to do the installation, and the actual kit's expensive as well. So there's no real business case. It's quite niche. You've got the homeowner's got to pay a couple of $100 for it. Whereas our system, because it's self-install, we just send this in the post and you clip it to the pipe. So it's a different proposition. So there's nothing quite like what we do.
Yep.
And
yep. I mean, I did it. Sorry, Mark. Yeah, on you go.
No, I was going to sort of talk about, since IPO, what's the business been focused on really? I mean, we've been speaking a lot on Stopbox, doing interviews. We're talking really mostly about the product, what it does, and why it's unique in the market, but also really it comes down to a business like you. You're not making discoveries. In theory, you've made your discovery. You've found your deposit, if you like, to make a mining analogy. It's now about selling that, isn't it? And getting into global markets and getting purely revenue through the door. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, the insurer model is well known. I mean, we understand it really well. We understand every aspect of the kind of funnel of how many customers take it up, how many install it, how many leaks are we going to have as a result, what's the return that we can deliver for the carrier. So it's about just turning the flywheel on, signing more partners, and then rolling more volume out with the ones that we've got.
And how are you approaching that, Craig? And also, how can investors understand perhaps the opportunity, let's say, the value opportunity?
Yeah, I mean there was a sponsored bit of research published by Bloompoint Partners recently, so I would recommend anyone who's interested to have a look at that. And that kind of explains the unit economics of the business. So it's a recurring revenue business model. So in the US, typically we'll charge $5 a month once these systems are installed, and then that will run on into the future. So we basically deliver a return on investment to the carrier as a result. I mean, there's probably $200 of underwriting cost on water damage on an average US policy, and here's a system for $60 that can basically take out a really large chunk of those claims costs. So basically, that's how the system works. If you look at just take some of the US partners. I mean, there are there's some of the top 10 insurers have got 3, 4. I think State Farm's got like 6 million policyholders, something like that. And if you look at it on a state-by-state basis, a lot of these guys have got like a couple of 100,000 policyholders in an individual state. So I think part of the approach in the US is just being clever about taking it a state at a time and working with the carriers about where we're going to launch into in what order.
And this is where you talk about those addressable households, isn't it? That's like your market opportunity that you have access to, isn't it? It's if a company has X amount of policy holders, what can you penetrate into that? Is it 1%? Is it 2%? And that's when you can start to understand the value. Is that a good way of thinking about it?
Yeah, that's a really good way to think about it. So a lot of our first partners were often high net worth insurers in the UK, and they had much smaller books of business. Whereas if you look at somebody like Sweden, Länsförsäkringar in Sweden, they've got a couple of million home insurance customers. And as I've talked about previously with you, Mark, and some of the other interviews we've done, we did a pilot with those guys, and in one particular region, we penetrated 40% of their customer base in one small region. We've since then signed a 5-year contract to roll this out across their business, and we've started that rollout now. But they've got 2 million customers. So if we can replicate what we did in the one test region across all of the regions in Sweden, you already get a sense for just how big the business can be just on that, based on that one deployment.
And would you say you're still in the sort of, I wouldn't, not experimental, it's definitely gone beyond experimental or prototype, of course, but are you still in a kind of market kind of proofing stage, would you say, with these trials that you're doing? Is it still at a point where your potential customers, insurance companies, are still kind of just testing the water with you? They're not fully sort of committed to buying in just yet?
No, I don't think so. So someone like Länsförsäkringar, like I say, we're into rollout. So a lot of the majority of the partners that we've got are rolling out the products rather than testing it. One of the challenges that we have is each insurer, when it's a new partnership, they often want to test it first themselves. And really the risk that they're taking is they're taking a pound or a dollar that they'd spend on claims on fixing a house, and instead they're pulling forward that spend to spend it on our technology, hoping that what we tell them is right, that they'll get the claim saving. But until they've seen it themselves, they often say, oh, well, we'll start a bit smaller and, we'll test this first, and then they expand it over time. I think, and then the frustrating thing about that is we know the return. So, you can definitely see a bigger stage of evolution. The key there is we could just, guarantee the claim saving. I think with a stronger balance sheet, we could do much bigger deals where we could say, look, don't worry about it. Like, we guarantee you'll be in the money after a year. And I think that would just make the deployments go a lot quicker. So I think that's really the only break when you sign new deals is they want to test the water first to check that they get the same result as everybody else, which seems to us an unnecessary step. But you can see, unless we're going to guarantee that they get the result, they kind of have to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And in terms of going forward then, Craig, I might ask you to make a 60-second pitch in a moment for the company, but in terms of just going forward and the plans, where's the focus of the business? Are you looking to increase your team, to increase the number of salespeople, so to speak, to get more sales in the door? Where's the focus at the moment and the strategy to effectively build this business into something potentially huge?
Yeah, I mean that is absolutely the key. So it's the focus is all about top line growth of the business. So we're going back to that, that Procter and Gamble way of looking at things. I think the strategy is clear. So the goal is to create a market leader in this exact space of risk mitigation technologies for home insurers. And in terms of where to play, we're really focused on the home market in the UK, Scandinavia, and the United States. There's interest from other countries. We get asked all the time, but we're really focused on those core markets. And the reason being is obviously we started in the UK. We've got a really great set of partners already in Scandinavia, and just focusing on that rollout in Sweden is a really big opportunity. And then really a massive focus for us as a team at the moment is the United States opportunity. It's not just that the market's big, it's just that the fundamental structural economics of that on a kind of per unit basis are so attractive. And our business case looks so good to those carriers that we're really doubling down on seeing if we can break through in the US. And, the potential for the business, if we do that, is huge. So, yeah, I mean, we're still a small team, and we're obviously trying to get to that break-even point as fast as we can. But the opportunity that we've got is massive in front of us. So I think with a few more proof points, I think it will catapult the business into a different phase yet again. You can see a much bigger business than what we are today on the horizon.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that was very good. Kenny, do you have any things to ask?
No, I was just looking at the clock there. I mean, that's almost an hour. It's just amazing how quickly these podcasts just flow. Perfect timing, I think, Mark. Craig, you sort of summed it up very well. So I think it's a perfect opportunity just to wind it up. Unless you've got anything else, Mark.
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's any need for that 60-second pitch. I think that pretty much came in that last question there. So thank you, Craig. So I'm very sure we'll be following the story very closely as things develop on ONDO. But thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks, guys. No, it was a real pleasure. Good to talk to you. I enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you for listening to another podcast from Market Musings with Fairbairn and Russell. Tune in next time.